Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Over It podcast. I am your co-host, Suzanne Kohlberg, joined as always by the fabulous Christine Kershaw. And today we have a guest. I am honoured to introduce Tad Hargrave from Marketing for Hippies. So Tad, take a moment, introduce yourself.
Okay, well, I run a business called Marketing for Hippies, and I help hippies figure out how to market their stuff better. I've been doing that for about 20 years, I guess. For a lot of hippies who feel torn of they either have to do a kind of marketing that is effective, or they do marketing that's ethical, and they feel like they have to choose. And so I suppose that the summing up of my work is that we don't have to choose, that you can do marketing that is both ethical and effective, and that in fact that works much better than trying to compromise.
That's fabulous. So I came across Tad in 2020, the year that was, and joined your then mentorship. And yeah, I really appreciate that stuck feeling. And I remember when I first started working with you, I was doing a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't particularly enjoy. And you were like, what are you doing this for? And I was like, because I have to. And you're like, you don't have to do shit. Like, you have to do something, but you don't have to do anything that feels gross or icky. So to get us started today, Tad, I'd love to know, particularly when it comes to business, but it could be in general, what are you over?
Well, I suppose I've been over it for a long time, but I'm fully over the thought that we need to manipulate anyone ever for any reason, unless possibly that they're wearing a badge, in which case I give ethical free rein. But this idea that we can that we need to do that's required somehow to get through life, except under situations of extreme duress. I don't think so. On the day-to-day, for most people, in most situations, the ethical approach works much better. And of course, that really is excluding situations of danger or extreme hardship. But I'm so over that. I'm over the constant finding new ways to rationalize our selfishness and to rationalize the manipulation and say that, well, this is really in the best interest of the client, or this is in the best interest of the person you're dating or want to date, or the best interest in your relationship with your kids. I don't think fundamentally that seduction and coercion are in anyone's best interest.
You did a webinar recently that I listened to, and you talked about the difference between coercion and persuasion. And what I took from that, and I'd love for you to summarize it for our listeners, obviously I'll put the link in, but whether you be covert or overt about your intentions behind something. So, if you're running a business, you have to have sales, or you don't have a business. Like, it's a non-for-profit, it's something else. So being upfront about the fact that, yes, I am selling in this case, not being covert about it, but also not saying, unless you have this thing, you're going to fail forever. And some of the really gross, back to your thing being over manipulative tactics that we see online so often and offline as well.
Yeah, there is a difference, coercion versus persuasion. I'm not against persuasion at all. I'm for it. I'm pro persuasion. But coercion is a different beast. Yeah, the persuasion is you're making a case for something, and you're very clear of what you're making the case for. You're laying out the most compelling argument you can find. You're sharing your understanding of why this certain approach is going to be the best. Or at least you're sharing the best understanding you have on that, so that the group can come up with a more robust, complete, accurate, helpful understanding. And I think that's important. But coercion means it's hidden. I remember some friends of mine with the business Authentic World, and they made a really important distinction. They did a lot of workshops with men. There was a distinction between creepy and slimy. So slimy is a objectifying thing, where we look at somebody as a tool in some way, but creepy is about veiled intention. Yeah, and there's if you're creepy is sort of lurking, in other words. If you're outside of somebody's awareness, no problem. If you're in their awareness and you're talking to them, that's no problem. But if somebody's just hanging out right at the peripheral vision all the time, waiting to get in, there's something very unsettling about somebody lurking without announcing themselves, without giving their intention. And so that's what creepy is, and that's what coercion is too. Is it's a veiled intention. There's no overt, and there's no overt intention given, and there's a lot of pretense. A pretend intention of, hey, we should go for coffee. I remember talking with a fellow, Zan Perrian, who's a dating coach, and he was at in New York at some department store, went to the perfume area. The woman working behind the counter was beautiful. And he said, look, I'm only in town today. What are your plans tonight? And whatever they're, cancel them. Come to dinner with me. And she said, are you asking me on a date? He said, look at you. Absolutely, I'm asking you on a date. Of course I am. And so then they went on a date. And she said, do you want to know why? I said, yes. And he said, I would, actually. And she said, because I get asked out all the time. Occupational hazard. And I always ask them, are you asking me out on a date? And almost always they say, oh, no. I was just thinking we could hang out and get to know each other for coffee. And so they lied. Their intention, she could feel it, she knew, was romantic, but they weren't willing to say it. This happens with funders all the time. Hey, we should just go for coffee. I'd love to get to know you as a person. And what they can feel is behind the scenes, the ask, the need, but it's not stated. And so that feels unnerving, frightening, unsafe, and disrespectful, possibly, versus just, look, we've got this project. It could use $10,000. I think you would love it. I think this would be something you'd be really aligned with. Would you be willing to give me 5 minutes just to give you the pitch on it? That lands as very safe and clean. If a man walks up to a woman and says, look, this is so random. I just saw you and I was going to kick myself all week if I didn't say hello. My name's John. Hello. It doesn't have to be smooth. Probably better that it's not smooth. But the fact that it's honest, that it's earnest, that it's transparent is more likely to work if there's any fit there. But it's certainly, as opposed to that feeling of, what is this about? And I know what this is about. And the fact that they aren't saying it maybe says something about them. And also, of course, doesn't land as any particular, I don't know, confidence or comfort in their own skin. So it's, coercion. I mean, in sales, coercion is all about trying to get the sale. It's all about trying to get them to say yes. But I mean, outside of sales, there's all sorts of ways that we try to get people to say yes to things without ever fessing up that that's what we're doing, rather than just having an honest conversation of, look, here's what I'm needing. Is this a fit? Are you interested in this? Because then they can say yes or no. And then it's a real upfront conversation, rather than, and the coercion is also, because coercion is not interested in whether it's a fit for the other person. So coercion is all upside. Coercion is all, hey, here's why you should do this. Here's the top 10 reasons. It's all going to be amazing. You benefit from this. This is how every new technology is introduced. Anytime there's a new technology, first of all, there is zero public discussion about it. And I mean, when's the last time any of us were consulted? Should we do this AI thing? Like, was anyone asked? No. And also, when they pitch it, it's all upside. It's all benefit. And if you're going to be respectful in an asking and persuasion, you have to acknowledge the downside. You have to say, look, here's the reasons not to do it. Here's what it will cost you to do this, financially, time-wise, risk. Here's the possibilities, sure, but here's the limitations. All of that is a part of the persuasion, because if somebody's going to say yes, we want it to be a really full-hearted, uncomplicated yes. From a business standpoint, of course, this is important for, you don't want refunds happening, you don't want buyer's remorse, you don't want people to complain, you don't want people to be difficult clients. Because yeah, you get the sale, you win today, but you lose tomorrow. But also in relationships. I mean, hey,
I can see that in parenting, the difference between coercion and persuasion with children. And it's been picked up by a number of people, particularly my family. Friends aren't as forthcoming saying, with the dialogue I enter into with my children. And it's like, no, you're the parent, they're the child. And I was like, I'm not setting that dynamic up, even from a young age. It's like, here's the upside, as you said, of doing this thing. Here's the downside. Then you have the choice. Or I might limit their choice so they can have this or this. Like, I don't give them free rein. But there's kind of, I've never been one to hide vegetables or, do something, to coerce them into getting my way. Because as you said, you win the battle, but you lose the war. And in marketing as well, I love, and anyone who's worked with you, I can normally tell the Tad sales page, because you have the, is it a fit? Like, yeah, are you sure? So if you buy anything from Tad, if you go check out his membership, it's fabulous. Highly recommend. I'm in there. When you go to buy it, you go to his are you sure page. You can't buy it straight up. And as you said, to lower the refund, to lower the risk, to have best fit clients rather than just people in the door who are going to be unhappy. And one of your pages, I haven't seen the one for the membership, but for your mentorship, you're like, one of the reasons I do this is because I want good testimonials. And if you're not happy, then you're not going to say good things about me. And I love the raw honesty in that.
Yeah, I don't think I actually have an Are You Sure page for the membership. Maybe just because the price is so much lower. But it is a good idea of, if you think that people are jumping in to buy your stuff too soon and you're noticing you're getting a lot of people aren't a fit, yeah, why not slow down the sales process? I mean, here's some good dating advice. Slow down, just slow the whole process down. Don't go so crazy in the beginning. Of course we want to. It's so exciting. But this is the old understanding of chaperones. Oh, it's not to kill the buzz. It's to give the relationship a chance. The Cree indigenous people, natives where I am from in Alberta, courting was a 4-year process. During that 4 years, you would not physically touch the one you were courting. Yeah. That's called much better survival rate of those relationships. Also, here's another thing they did, is they said, so you two are interested in each other. We are not entirely convinced. We'll see. But here's part of how we're going to tell if this is a good idea, is if you can get 4 people to take a stand for your marriage and to vouch for it. And what that means is, if there is trouble between the two of you, those 4 will be the ones we go to fix it. They take responsibility. Now, you grow up in a community like that, maybe you see a relationship or two go south, you see what it does to those 4 people. And somebody comes to you and say, hey, will you stand for a marriage? And you look at them and you're funny. You're funny. With her? She crazy. And you're stupid. So, no, this is not happening. So we could really stand to slow things down and look at the consequence of what we're doing, and encourage people to look at the consequences of the things we're asking them for. Because if they do, and they still say yes, it's more likely to be upside. But if we focus on the upside going in, there's likely to be plenty of downside for all involved.
You've been vigorously nodding, Christanne, so I was going to see if you've got anything to chime in.
Well, I just, I love, because so much of this is very well aligned with how I run my business. And I'm realizing how much we built a lot of this in without not intending to. There's always been the intention to be very upfront, but it doesn't sit well ethically with me. And I think the what you were saying right from the beginning, if it's not an all body yes, I can't be involved in it, or if there's an incongruence. And I think what this is doing is really good for people to start becoming really aware of how much around us is coercive and just sitting on that cusp all the time. And sometimes you can be outcast as a, well, why are you doing it that way? It's not, the best way to get sales, and you can get external pressures on you, whether it's in parenting, like you were saying, Suze, or business. Well, that's not the quickest way to grow your business. No, but it's the most ethical. And it means that is a lot less on customer service. There's a lot more happy people who will then, with time, spread out and go tell everyone how much they love your business.
Yeah, at the end of the day, word of mouth is the engine of marketing. And that's just, of course. I mean, there are tons of statistics to back that up. There's tons of studies. That's why we buy. Everybody knows it intuitively. But what is it that creates word of mouth? Well, it's not coercion. I mean, I'll tell you that. Because here's the trouble with coercion is when we apply pressure on people, whether they're conscious of it or not, they feel it. And there are two reactions that people often feel like reactions, not responses, but there are two ways that people tend to react to this. They either submit or they rebel. Yeah. And those are both trouble. And why? Because they're reactions. So, if you were thinking about, we're trying to get somebody to do something, we want them to say yes to something. So we think, well, if I had to choose between them rebelling and submitting, clearly I would choose submission. So that's what I'm aiming at. So then there's all sorts of tactics that get used. The book Influenced by Robert Cialdini outlines 6 of these laws of unconscious persuasion that are used ongoingly to get us to say yes. I mean, most of modern advertising is very intimately tied historically with propaganda. So they have our number. I mean, they have us so properly dialed. And now with the AI, the algorithms, I mean, they understand our behavior much better than we understand our own behavior. And they know how to push our buttons. And we're not in good shape societally anyways. We're depleted, exhausted, traumatized, etc. We're just ripe for the picking. And so we submit often. If you find yourself agreeing with everything they say on TV, mayday. If you find yourself agreeing with billionaires on the regular, mayday. It's but we submit very easily. And the trouble with submission, especially when it's under that kind of duress and pressure and coercion, is it isn't full-hearted. It's a kind of half-hearted, I'm doing it because it gets me approval or money or whatever. And that becomes a ticking time bomb, and that can often turn into rebellion later. Or there's a consequence on the world of what happens with a world of collapsed people. Yeah, because we could say another way to look at this is most of us in life, we tend to go towards either we posture, puff ourselves up, pretend we're a bigger deal than we are, or we collapse. One of those two.
I'm just going to interrupt there, Tad, because you've been talking about the rebellion versus submission. Do you think there is a link there with the submission being the collapse? Would the rebel be the posturing, or do you think they're related?
The submission certainly is has a kinship with collapse. Is rebellion posturing? I don't know if it is. That it may be a different beast. I mean, Linda Katz, or of course you know, with singingbirdcoaching.com. Yeah, she has a beautiful model that for so many women, they're torn between the good girl and the rebel. So I think it's a slightly different axis, but I don't know, maybe one is this the x-axis, one's the y-axis. Maybe there's a grid there somehow, but yeah, that's often true. For men, there's the sort of badass, and then there's the nice guy. And I think a lot of men feel torn in that way. And so we go for the nice guy, the good girl, the collapsed version. But yeah, if you're trying to succeed in the face of this sort of, you're trying to get what you want. You're trying to get your needs met somehow. Maybe you don't want to collapse. So then you might posture. You might think, well, I'll just pretend everything's fine. Instead of being small, I'll make myself really big. Instead of seeming like I have a lack of confidence, I'll puff up. And maybe I could do a screen share and show this this chart here. So this was a chart
I'll just give you the permission 1 second.
Yeah, this was a chart I came up with years ago as a way of articulating the difference. Because if you imagine there's sort of collapse and posturing, and the goal is not to do a compromise of both, but there's a higher ground that makes it a sort of pyramid, if you will. And so, right, okay, so this is the chart. I won't go through the whole thing, right? But collapsing looks like a lack of confidence, posturing overconfidence, but composure more like comfort in your own skin. Collapsing, you make yourself very small, don't want to take up space. Posturing, you make yourself big, take up more space than you need. And composure, you're just you-sized. You take up the space that you need, right? Collapsing, lose-win, win-lose, and then win-win or no deal. The victim, the bully, the hero. There's all sorts of ways of saying this. This is one of the most common patterns I've seen. Different cultures around the world seem to have this understanding. Different teachers, everybody's got their own.
And do you find, because we were talking just before we hit record, that people who are in the collapsed state, and I imagine a lot of our listeners might relate to this, I know I can relate to this, and this is my go-to, when you are so far on that side of the balance or the scale, that the healthy composed feels like a posture, because you know, what would you suggest to people so they can kind of really, because like sometimes asking for their needs to be met feels posturing to them when they've been collapsed for so long that they don't want to be pushy or they don't want to, you know, take up too much space.
Well, yeah, my guess is if they were really posturing, they wouldn't be asking for their needs to be met, they'd be demanding. Maybe that's what it feels like. Part of the way out of this is the thing that unites posturing and collapsing is that they're both driven by a hidden agenda to get the other person to say yes. But in composure, we have to let that agenda go. And so it is a win-win or no deal. It's just, look, here's my needs. Are you able to do that? No? Okay, that's fine. Then I gotta go. And we walk away. And developing the inner strength to do that. And yes, it is, if you've been collapsing and you've been deep collapsing, first of all, even acknowledging that you have needs is a mind-shattering concept. That those needs are legitimate and okay to have. That's a whole other level. And that it's okay to ask. I mean, my God, this is the stuff of, you know, revolutions of the mind. And it's such an unexercised muscle. So I think it feels very strange. It feels very awkward. And but the trouble is, so much of the antidote that people give to the collapsing is this posturing. They say, aha, you know, you've been the good girl for so long. Well, come and be a rebel and be a badass. And you tell that person to, you know, shove it. And you just, and boy, I mean, it feels good at a certain level, but it's also just, it's another trap. It's another iteration of the same thing. The way Linda talks about it so beautifully is you have the tyrant king right above, and both the good girl and the rebel, all their energy goes towards the tyrant king. The rebel in rebelling against the king, the good girl in trying to please the king, but the king is still the center of their life. You know, the badass guy doesn't, you know, I don't care about women or my mom or whatever. And the good guy, the nice guy is just trying to please his mom or please women all the time. But they're both still centered on the thing that they imagine they're either rebelling against, or one day they'll please and it'll be okay. So there's this whole different shift in orientation. And I mean, that takes a lot of work to find a way between self-hatred and self-glorification.
I love the linchpin or the common denominator being the agenda. So remember you and I having a discussion once about people pleasers versus narcissists. And it was like people pleasers are just as manipulative as narcissists because they want people to like them. That's the manipulation. It's in, you're doing this so that they will like you. Whereas when you don't have the agenda, it's like you like yourself. And it's up to you to get your needs satisfied. And yes, you can ask for things, but if people say no, you don't make that mean anything about how they feel about you or yourself as a person. You're like, well, I can ask somebody else.
Yeah, it's yeah, exactly. The people, it's very easy to look at the posturing side and say, oh, those people. I mean, who wants to be grandstanding, aggressive, douchebag? Who wants to, wants to be one of those people who's always wanted to feel important, to puffing up and be an asshole and grandiose and narcissist and overreactive? Nobody wants to be around them. But do you think people want to be around somebody who's just profoundly needy in an uncontained way, who's overgiving all the time? But why are they overgiving? Well, they're overgiving because they're trying to get something. They're trying to get approval. They're trying to get love. If I just give enough, will you like me? And that that's very difficult to be around. People fundamentally don't trust it. They back away from it if they're healthy. If somebody's in a composed place and they're around somebody who's totally collapsed, there's little danger signals going off of just don't get too close, or don't trust this person too much. Not in a judgmental way, but it's this person is fronting in their own way. They're pretending in their own way. They're pretending that they don't have any needs, and that's dangerous as hell. That's in some ways more dangerous than somebody who's demanding that their needs be met, because at least they're upfront in some ways about what they're doing. Whereas when it's this covert, hidden, nice thing, oh yeah, I'll just a free session. Oh yeah, it's fine. Oh no, it's no problem. And of course, what that leads to is resentment and bitterness, which is not a sustainable approach. And also guilt to the person who's receiving it. They just keep receiving, and that will push people away. They feel so indebted to the person who's given them so much. And there's a certain point where if they can't give back, they have to back away. They may not even be aware they're doing it. They just notice they feel so uncomfortable around this person and receiving all these things for no reason without earning. But there is a reason. They want that person to love them. And it's so unspoken, and it's so innocent, and it's so ineffective and uncomfortable for all involved.
I can just see like it becoming a pendulum for some people. Like if you are so exhausted at being collapsed, then you go to the polar opposite of being posturing so much, and then that's so uncomfortable and so unfamiliar, and also isn't getting your needs met. I was looking at the chart there where you had like, what the fuck, why is nobody doing anything for me? And then the other end was like, no fucks given. And then in the middle you had appropriate fuck distribution, or whatever you had written. I loved that, because we did an episode with Kristen King, and it was like how to give fewer fucks. It was a deliberate choice of our title. It wasn't how to give no fucks, because that, as you've got here, is posturing, like I don't give a fuck about anything. But appropriate fuck distribution, like where do I want to be invested in this, and whereas like I'm just going to let this one go. And underneath it you've got just taking the beating when you're in the collapse state, where you just cowering down or always on the defensive even when you're not being attacked, versus like being self-respective but not reactive, like I'm not available for this, or I'm tapping out here, and learning that range for each individual person and noticing which way that you go towards. And finding that composed middle that you speak of is, I think, a never-ending cycle for people.
This is so much of the human challenge, is this trying to thread the needle on this one. My favorite one, by the way, is the last one. I'm not all right. I'm so all right and always right. All right, all right, all right.
Chrisanne, have you got anything to add? And I'll just mute you, Tad, because I think when Chrisanne comes on, it makes our microphones go a bit weird.
Not really. I love how applicable this is. So if someone's listening and they're in small business and trying to think how they want to grow their business, this applies. If someone's looking at their own relationships, whether it's with kids or family or whatever, it's being a human that you're talking about. It's not just being for hippies or for anyone else. Like, it makes so much sense. And certainly a lot of what you shared, I've not thought of in that way, but realized how much I've been applying bits of that in what I do working with clients, in how I support team members. And also when I look at any interpersonal relationship, how frustrating it is on either end, because there can be a lot of people pleasers, and I think I fall into that category probably more than posturing or collapsing necessarily. But I see that in me, but I've been gradually working over time to get better at, well, this is what I need, this is what the business needs, or whatever. I've been known to just say, it is what it is, like, this is what I need. And I don't judge if someone can't help me. I just want to know, can you work with me on this? Can you? And I'd much rather, I've just been having a discussion earlier today, actually, if you can't help me, if you're in my business, or I've just had a text message this morning from an electrician who I've asked probably a month ago, one of the kids' lights, we can't turn it on because it like fritzes, it flicks and it sizzles, and it's like, I'm not sure that this is safe to do. If he just said, I'm really busy at the moment, I actually can't do this until whenever, I probably would have gone, okay. But I've texted a couple of times, and that's how I normally communicate with him, so that's nothing different. He's just texted me today going, I'm sorry, I obviously haven't done the work. Do you still need me? I've been really inundated or something, which is fine. Like, but it would have been so much better for me to know if he was going to be busy, well, maybe I would have got someone to do it more urgently, because we've got plugged in lights that are being used as lamps and all sorts of stuff, so that she actually has light in her bedroom. So it's so much clearer to go, this is my needs in my business, in my personal life, whatever. But it takes work to get there. I wasn't always where I am now. Like, that's been part of my journey. And I think everybody's on their own, and listening to this podcast, you're more than likely on some sort of a journey where you're trying to understand how you make choices, things you do, again, whether it's business, family, or otherwise. And the more that you're in a stressed out mode, from my point of view with the minerals and the health side of things, the more that you're trying to puff your chest out and be bigger than you are, or be a people pleaser, your body's in fight or flight more, and you're going to find everything so much more overwhelming. You're going to find everything just, oh, why is life so tough? That's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy, and then your health will suffer without any shadow of a doubt. The more that you can be aware of how you respond to different signals, different conversations, we can get really upset or offended by someone saying something. But please never take any offense if I go, I don't have space for this right now. I've got a lot going on. I can't help you in this, or I can help you, but not until here, or whatever. Because I'm just putting a clear boundary on that to keep me going, because I juggle a million and one things at any given point in time. But I try not to let that be my identifying feature either of, I'm busy and this is how I function, because I think that's also puffing out the chest to go, it's good to be busy. I don't like that. I choose what I do very consciously most of the time. You know, we all get in the cycles where it's not ideal. I'm going to put that there too. Anyway, there's some musings from me.
Well, a few thoughts occur to me. One is, I think about parenting, and if the parent is fundamentally reactive, just you were saying, good to notice how we respond to things. And to say that even differently, it's good to notice, are we responding to things, or are we reacting to things? And most of the time, in the modern world, we're just reacting. It's a reflex. So there's no big achievement there at all. There's nothing to write home about. And that kind of reactivity has people feel unsafe in our presence, because they can see that we're like a stripped wire, and we're just sparking. So they have to be extra careful. So if you're a child and your parent is taking everything personally on the collapse side and becoming just a wounded puppy, or they puff up and then they get very tetchy and defensive, boy, you develop a bunch of strategies as a child to deal with that. But if your parent can stay loving, calm, and centered, even when the kid's testing them, and just say, hey, yeah, so this isn't working right now, and we're going to need to figure out some other way. I hear that you're upset, and I need you to use your words now and not be screaming, or we're going to have to leave. It's up to you. What do you want to do? You know, if they can be talking from that place, you know, where we speak from in ourselves, we speak to in other people. And so if I'm speaking from a reactive place, that's the place I hit in other people. But if I can be speaking from a more calm, centered, composed place, I'm more likely to bring that out of the other. It's the whole nervous system entrainment. You know, if one person's nervous system is very settled, they can bring the others into that, and everybody can settle down. When they're looking at wolves and they're trying to figure out which wolf will be the alpha male in a pack, the two criteria I've heard that are most common: one, you can usually tell because it has the lowest resting heart rate as a cub, and second, it's the one that's best at initiating play. And there's no initiating play if you're triggered all the time, if you're in fight or flight all the time. Play is one of the first casualties. It goes out the window. And the other thing, it's so, I want to read a poem. This is by William Stafford, and it's called A Ritual to Read to Each Other. Easy to find on the internet. It goes like this. If you don't know the kind of person I am, and I don't know the kind of person you are, a pattern that others made may prevail in the world, and following the wrong God home, we may miss our star. For there's many a small betrayal in the mind, a shrug that lets the fragile sequence break, sending with shouts the horrible errors of childhood, storming out to play through the broken dike. And as elephants parade, holding each elephant's tail, but if one wanders, the circus won't find the park. I call it cruel, and maybe the root of all cruelty, to know what occurs, but not recognize the fact. And so I appeal to a voice, to something shadowy, a remote, important region in all who talk. Though we could fool each other, we should consider, lest the parade of our mutual life get lost in the dark. For it's important that awake people be awake, or a breaking line may discourage them back to sleep. The signals we give, yes, or no, or maybe, should be clear. The darkness around us is deep.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. I really resonated with what you said about reacting versus responding, especially in parenting, because Krista and I were having this exact conversation the other day. My daughter Xanthi came home from school and said, this kid did, I can't even remember. Kristan's nodding. But my parents' reaction would have been to get really reactive and ring the school or, you know, corner the kid or whatever. My first question was, so what did you do that encouraged the child to do this? It was like, people don't randomly come and do stuff. Like, we only ever hear one side of the story. And I think it's so common in life that, you know, and then how things are portrayed in the media, you only see one side, or it's deliberately manipulated to show it in this way. And then everyone's getting on side. And it's like, what else happened here? Or with the children when they argue with each other, like siblings, you know, we get that. But it's like, one Xanthi will come in, Casimir did this. And I was like, so why did he do this? What did you do? So it's just that taking that step back and noticing that we do get reactive, or if we are creating something or launching something or doing something, or even, you know, gifts is my love language. If I get really excited buying a gift and I expect or hope for a response, and it's just like, oh, you shouldn't have, and chucked to the side or whatever, it's kind of, it's disappointing. And it's interesting, as overgivers, we are often really challenged to receive. And it's like, or we're conditioned that don't brag or don't be, too excited or whatever. And it's just kind of like, but the effort that people put in or what else is going on, like that pause to ask more rather than to immediately come offside. Anyway, that's what I took from what you shared. So thank you, Tad.
You're welcome. And just one little refined distinction. It's okay to be excited about things we've done. It's okay to be proud of the things we've done. Where it slips over the edge is if we get excited for somebody to say yes to us. That's where it's likely to slip into pressure. It's okay to be excited about what you've made. It's probably slippery to be excited for this particular person to buy, because now they're dealing with your expectations and your hopes, and now they have to contend with your feelings. And if they can tell that your good feelings are going to hinge on whether you say yes or no, that's not safe for them. But if they can really get a sense, well, yeah, you're excited about what you've done, and if they say yes, you'd be okay, and if they say no, you'd be okay. If they say yes, life is amazing. If they say no, life is still amazing. The amazingness of life, not up for grabs, not in question. Then people feel actually safe to say no. And that means just no right now. They might say yes later, and they also might know somebody else who'd want to say yes. These no's are not permanent, they're not all pervasive, and they don't mean anything about us. The only thing it means when somebody says no is this particular arrangement in this moment is not a fit, period. That's it. Another way to say it, this arrangement you've offered me, I can't see how that's going to meet my needs. So they say no. And we might be able to persuade or help them see, no, I think this could meet your, like, give me 5 minutes. I think this could meet your needs. And then they may come to it and say, oh, yeah, or they may not. But it's so tricky, because we're taught in sales, be enthusiastic. But the enthusiasm itself can become another manipulation. So there's so many subtle things, but the blade that cuts through all of this is, what's my agenda here? Is it a hidden agenda that they buy, that they say yes, that they do what I want? Or is it the overt, open agenda to engage in a conversation where we're just getting to the truth of, is this a fit? Are we schmoozing and pitching people, or are we conversing with people? Are we trying to convert people, or are we trying to have a conversation with people? Because those are two very different dynamics. And if we can be so candid and upfront with people about where we're at, it's so relieving to them. And also, if we are asked, and we can give a very clear yes or no, or maybe, but it's clear, it's such a relief. Because what's happening, especially if everybody's collapsing and running around and trying to, what does this person want me to say? And we're all trying to feed each other the thing that we think the other person wants to hear, whether it's true or not, then we get what William Stafford is talking about here, we don't know who each other are. So if you don't know the kind of person I am, and I don't know the kind of person you are, well, how could you? If either posturing or collapsing and you're wearing a mask and nobody can actually see the other person, then a pattern that others made may prevail in the world. Yeah, if we're not in touch with ourselves, our own needs, our own values, our own soul or intuition, however you want to say it, we are so ripe for the picking. The agenda of the media is not primarily liberal or conservative. It's outrage. That's the primary drive of the media, is, if it bleeds, it leads. Can they get us to have a strong emotional reaction? Because if we have a strong reaction, we will keep watching. I mean, with COVID, there was all this stuff about the lab leak or whatever, and who knows. And the only way they could have sold more newspapers with that is if they had convinced the world that somehow this was tied to Princess Diana and she was actually transporting SARS-CoV-2 in her
or Elvis.
Or Elvis. JFK didn't die. He was trying to prevent this lab. But that's what's been gone for, is this reactivity. Can they push our buttons? And the answer is yes. And so if we let our buttons be pushed, a pattern that others made may prevail in the world. And the pattern that has been made by those on top, it does not include our best interests. The rich and powerful of the world, on the whole, they're not getting together in their clubs as benefactors. They do have their own agendas. And and then that line, and following the wrong God home, we may miss our star. I'm just saying that outrage is the wrong God to follow home. There's other gods about truth and kinship and honesty, candor. These are more worthwhile. And this line too, for there's many a small betrayal in the mind, a shrug that lets the fragile sequence break, meaning our relationships with each other are so iffy. If they're going to be alive, it's a real moment to moment thing of relating and sharing and listening and vulnerabilities galore. I remember a relationship coach. She was in the mentorship I did with you for a while, but I think she might have been before your time. But she had this line where she said, if you want the relationship to be for real and to be vulnerable, you have to be willing to risk the entire relationship in every moment. If you really want to be authentic, you have to be willing to put the whole thing on the line in service to the truth. Because if you're not, to the extent you're not, it becomes bullshit. It becomes a sham. It becomes a bit of a farce and a pantomime. And now we're just trying to manipulate each other, but to do it gently. And so what this cares for is an immense amount of mindfulness and a real rigorous commitment to the truth and to not reacting, but responding, because the smallest shrug, the smallest offhand thing can actually send the whole thing careening. As we all know in our life, we're doing so great. And then somebody gets a little bit reactive with us and it can throw the whole dynamic off. And of course, it's this, as you're saying, Suzanne, with your kids, well, what did you do? So people have situations that go south with clients or in dating or with their kids or with their spouse. And when you trace it back, it's often just a shrug. It's often an eye roll at the wrong moment. It's such a small thing that comes from reactivity, meaning it happens so fast, it just slips out. And then, oops, but now it's already out. And that this line too, sending with shouts the horrible airs of childhood, storming out to play through the broken dike. That's as good a articulation of reactivity as I've ever heard. The horrible airs of childhood, storming out to play through the broken dike. What broke the dike? The shrug. Something so small. And those small shrugs are so much more likely to come if we're committed to holding on to either the posturing or collapsing, or if we're unwilling to examine that. Then it's shrugs galore, and the dikes are just in rubble, and it's nothing but the horrible errors of childhood, meaning no adults in the room anymore. And this world so desperately needs adults. It's the big chasm today, I don't think is so much between men and women as adults and children. And I'm not even talking age. This is one of the primary axes right now is, maybe the whole gender thing is one, but the age thing emotionally is such another one.
That's something I ask myself. We'll have to wrap up soon because I was just looking at time. We could talk to you forever. But if and it happens to me, like happens to all of us, when I'm reactive and something happens and I catch myself in it. You don't always catch yourself, but I catch myself. A question I ask myself and I encourage my clients, like, how old am I? Is it like, because is it 39-year-old Suze who's really put off by this, or is it something that happened when I was young that's been frozen in time to someone else? Like the littlest of things. And it's like, this isn't, my healthiest expression, and it's okay, but it's to kind of like pause this and, you know, deal with this in my own time and not put it on to the person who's in the room with me at that time. So I'm looking forward to listening back to this, Tad. You've given us so much food for thought. Before we finish up, where can people find you?
Marketingforhippies.com is where you can find all my stuff.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Anything you want to add, Christine, before we wrap up?
No, I think you nailed it all and gave us, you know, like you said, Sue, so much to consider. And it's so fascinating to see how all the different dynamics in our world tie into this. And that self-awareness makes such a big difference. If a takeaway that they may be going, wow, I do a lot of posturing and I do a whole lot of puffing out and all that. You don't have to fix this in a heartbeat. This is something that we work on and go, oh, but if you gain just little bits of awareness of and that reactivity side of things that you were talking to, so many people so stressed out, they don't know anything different except being reactive. So if you can just start to do little things, and we talk about this across our episodes, little things towards gaining self-awareness, and what could you say the next time that scenario happens? If you've already done it, well, you can't take it back. You can't, that's already been and happened, but you can give a bit of self-love back and go, well, I didn't know any different at that time. Now I've noticed it. What can I do the next time my child does something that I then react to? Well, how could I approach it differently, or a colleague or whatever? I think there's a lot that people can do.
Go ahead, Tad, you're muted.
Sorry about that. If I could just take us home with these last two stanzas. So I appeal to a voice, to something shadowy, a remote, important region in all who talk. Though we could fool each other, we should consider, lest the parade of our mutual life get lost in the dark, for it's important that awake people be awake. Or a breaking line may discourage them back to sleep. The signals we give, yes or no, or maybe, should be clear. The darkness around us is deep, awake, responsive, asleep, reactive. The darkness is deep these days, so we could fool each other, but we should consider otherwise.
I love that. Thank you so much, Tad. This has been fabulous. Thank you to everyone listening. Please let us know your biggest takeaway. It would be super curious. And if you have liked this episode, please share it with your friends. And we really appreciate ratings, reviews, sharing it up. It helps us reach more people. So thank you, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.